Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. My name is Lori Lizotte. On behalf of Women Tech Network, I'd like to welcome you to this exciting Ask Me Anything event hosted by Carnegie Mellon University's Tepper School of Business. At Women Tech Network, we are committed to empowering women in all stages of their tech career, and our networking community spans across the globe, connecting women and organizations who are passionate about making a difference in the tech industry. We're thrilled to collaborate with Carnegie Mellon's Masters of Science in Product Management program. Carnegie Mellon is world-renowned for its excellence in business and technology education, and the MSPM program is a shining example of this. It equips students with the essential knowledge and skills to excel in the exciting field of product management. In fact, many members of our global community are esteemed graduates of this program. Today's event is a unique opportunity to gain some practical insights from students and alumni of this program. And we encourage you to take full advantage of this event by engaging with the speakers, asking your questions in the chat. They are here to answer your inquiries and are excited by your motivation and your eagerness to join them on this journey. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Brad Iben. He is the Executive Director of the Masters of Science in Product Management program at Carnegie Mellon University. Welcome, Brad.
Thanks, Lori. Really excited to be here. As always, we love our partnership with Women Tech Network, and really thrilled to have another session in which we have the opportunity to share the journeys of some of our alumni from past years. Today, we'll talk with 3 women PMs from different graduation years, 2019, 2021, and 2022. And really this discussion is all about informing aspiring product managers as to what they need to consider, what skills they need to develop, to encourage them. Everybody has doubts in making decisions for career transfers and taking that big leap into leadership. And ideally, and I'm sure this will be the case, we want their stories to inspire those of you who are in attendance and who are following with us. My name is Brad Iben. As Lori mentioned, I am the Executive Director of the MS in Product Management program here at SAMU. It's a hybrid program between the School of Computer Science and the Tepper School of Business here. We cover business, technology, design, leadership, and throughout it all, there's experience built in to the program itself. I describe it as more of a training program than an academic program. That said, we'll introduce the 3 panelists we have today. We want today's discussion to be casual, interactive. Feel free to ask questions. These people, and I'm not saying this lightly, all 3 of the women on your screen are role models. And if you do half of what they do right, you're doing a good job. So feel free to ask questions about their journey, questions about advice, obstacles, all types of things that are relevant to you in the audience as you aspire or consider making the leap to product management. So we'll get started. And Pranita, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you for the intro, Brad. Hi, everyone. I'm Pranita. I completed my master's in product management in 2019, started out my career in tech consulting and transitioned into the master's that way. And I've had about a handful of, maybe I think 3 different roles at this point in product across different industries, different focus areas since finishing my master's. And I'm originally from the DC area.
And Pranita, to kick us off, what would you say you love most about product management to date?
I think one of the most interesting challenges is definitely aligning different cross-functional stakeholders around a unified product vision is really satisfying to me, and especially doing it across different industry areas, especially with people with different backgrounds. I think it's a really cool problem to solve always.
And we'll transfer over to our 2021 grad, MK. MK, would you like to introduce yourself and sort of let us know what brings you here or how you got here?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Hi, everyone. I'm MK Batra. As Brad mentioned, I was part of MSPM 2021. Before coming over here, I was in Bangalore working in tech. At that time, I was not product manager, and like after this program, I joined Microsoft and has been working as a product manager with them for a couple of years. I'm working on Copilot extensibility at Microsoft, and I'm really excited about this journey because previously I used to have a love for B2C industry, and that's something that Brad knows a lot about because I used to talk about that a lot during my course there. And now I'm in B2B industry, and now it has grown on me. So enjoying this part of the journey.
What are you enjoying most, MK?
I think kind of impact is similar in both areas, but kind of access you have to the customers because in B2B the customers are much more vocal, and that really helps sometimes to navigate into that right direction. So yeah, that's a part that is challenging as well as interesting.
Great. And our 2022 grad today, Sindhu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, Brad. Hey all, hi, I'm Sindhu. I'm working as a product manager at AWS. I joined AWS last year, and we actually launched a product that went GA yesterday. So this has been a very timely meeting to kind of proudly announce that to all you folks. Every step in my career has subsequently led to the other part, and that's kind of how I came to CMU for my MSPM. Started as a data analyst. The data crunching led me to campaign management in digital advertising, working with different stakeholders. In campaign management led me to product management, and working on internal tools made me realize, oh, I lack customer empathy. I am not that good at strategic thinking or creative solutioning. So that's kind of what led me into MSPM, and I'm happy to be part of this cohort today, talking to you all.
And what do you love most about product management, Sindhu?
I think, and I've been very fortunate in this regard. I have been part of many 0 to 1 product launches, and to be honest, that's quite exciting. You kind of get a little bit of the flavor of everything, right? Working with customers, handling different stakeholders, setting a vision. So that's been the most exciting part for me in my
Great.
product management journey.
And congratulations on the launch.
Thank you.
So let's change gears a little bit and talk about motivation, because I think it's safe to say a lot of our attendees, a lot of the people viewing this, are in a stage where they might be considering product management looks attractive to me, or I'm dead set to become a product manager from wherever I am right now. Would anyone like to discuss your own personal aha moment where you said, okay, it's not a maybe anymore. It's definitely product manager is the direction I'm ready to go?
Sure, I can answer that because I kind of fell into product management and then discovered that I actually enjoy doing it. So I started working for a startup in a campaign management capacity, but in a startup, you kind of wear multiple hats, right? So I was doing a little bit of data analysis, and that's kind of how I started doing product analysis for a new product that they were building from scratch. And because I was handling a lot of that, I kind of fell into this role of defining requirements for an internal data pipeline, and realized that I actually enjoyed doing it, talking to the different data vendors that we had at that time, understanding their requirements, translating that for engineers, working with UX for the first time ever. And that was sort of my aha moment. I had two paths to choose from at that time, either go full into data analytics or into product, and I decided product was the right path for me.
So you wanted to find out what the right thing to build was, what the right problem to solve was.
Yep, that's correct.
MK, Pranita, is there a moment for either of you?
Yes, for me, it was like when I was working in India as a program manager in my company. So I really used to love like design discussions, and those were the ones that always used to excite me. And I was like, okay, this is something I want to do. I want to work more closely with designers to be at that initial phase, and that's when I also realized that it's eventually at that point I was not the one who could call shots at what design has to be picked, what has to be the experience. And that's when I realized that, okay, like the next journey that I want to choose, I want to be also have be empowered to take that call as well while working with them. So hence it was like, okay, yeah, like product management is a space I would love to be in.
Great.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit similar, but I think, as I mentioned, like having a tech consulting background, often I was like embedded on teams where our client would be like the product manager. And because I was really oriented towards like being a product analyst, being product execution focused, it became pretty natural that like if I wanted to transition into industry, the parallel role there really was like product management. And so it was almost like thinking about like, oh, who are the clients that I interact with? Like, what do they do on a day-to-day basis? And it was like, oh, I really would enjoy doing that. I would love understanding more about like the strategy and being closer aligned to the business so I can really drive more of that product vision as well. So that's kind of it wasn't an immediate aha moment, but it was kind of like I think as I looked back on my experience, it kind of made me realize that's the direction I wanted to go in.
Pranita, I'm glad you mentioned the phrase day to day, because I'm willing to bet that I'm going to get three very different answers on this. So for those people at the beginning of the journey, it's kind of mysterious what a PM does day to day, right? Does anyone have a good answer? Like, you could talk for a few hours just on that, but how would you characterize your own role and the roles of maybe other PMs around you?
I can go. I think mainly because I don't think I introduced a little bit of like what I do earlier, but I'm currently a product manager at PlayStation, focused on the AI ML platform. And the reason I kind of start with that is because I think it looks a lot different than other product management I've done in the past. I would say that the customers I work with are more like the B2B to C, as they call it. So I serve data scientists and machine learning engineers who enable our end like players and partners that we work with to build games too. So a lot of my role is kind of like demystifying what the machine learning development workflow process looks like, which is really what the product is here. So it's definitely going to be a little bit more like product execution focused, while also kind of understanding what our AI ML strategy looks like across the company so that we can keep building product features and platform features that really help enable that. So I would say it's a little bit more like maybe at any day it could be 60-40. Some days it's like less execution. I'm really thinking on that kind of strategic vision. In other roles that I've worked in that are a bit more customer focused, I'm sure MK and Sindhu can speak to that as well, has been definitely working closer with like UX teams, maybe having a little bit more interaction with our customers directly to understand their problems and kind of contextualize how that fits into our roadmap.
I can go next. So, like, what Printa was sharing earlier, like working with multiple stakeholders, I guess, like that becomes like kind of a day to day at many times, which is like everybody's from very different industries. Somebody's from design, somebody's from analyst team, somebody's from eng team or business team. So, multiple stakeholders. It totally day to day for me varies a lot at what stage I am, because Microsoft as an organization is very conference driven, which is like we have next Ignite coming in November. So we are already in like planning stage on what we have to do next. So like right before this call, I was in meeting with our designers to talk through like what we have to next, and in the evening I'll be talking to the eng team on like, okay, what decisions have you made and what they have to think about. So it's definitely a lot of collab between multiple stakeholders.
Yeah, I can go next. And so from my perspective, it's kind of a mix of what Pranita and MK said, right? Which is initially when we were in the ideation phase or in defining like the vision, there was a lot of day-to-day that basically involved me talking to customers or finding customers or doing industry research or talking to UX, because there were so many iterations of mocks that we had to create for all variety of scenarios, and then having leadership meetings to walk them through, hey, this is what we're thinking. And there was one period of time when there was a lot of leadership meetings, because you have the data now, you need to persuade a lot of stakeholders to invest or sponsor this particular product that you're pitching. And then there is the execution phase, which is a lot of, like daily scrums, firefighting. You basically become like a QA person yourself, right? You're testing, you doing low fidelity wireframes yourself. So a lot of the day-to-day work was kind of like that. Now I'm working on like an internal service. So my customers are other teams. So it's a lot of my customer feedback or customer sessions are now with other engineering teams. So it's a little bit of working with different tech teams and trying to corral their PMs into this common vision. So the day-to-day kind of involves a variety of these things. But yeah, overall, just talking to so many people and then having space to kind of collect your thoughts and put it into some shape or form.
Thanks all. Now I'm gonna step back a little bit. We're gonna go back a little bit to the aha moment, or the point where you were convinced that this transition, this direction is the right way to go. Now, a lot of either myths or truths related to product management. It's difficult to find a job. It's difficult. It's a high responsibility job. There's a lot on your shoulders as a PM. And you came from other positions, so in some ways a complete shift, in other ways sort of an evolution into product management. As you were in that stage, as you were in the stage that many of our viewers are right now, were there ever points where you had doubts, or points where you either doubted yourself or doubted your own capability, or doubted whether it was worth taking that risk? Because one thing that I describe all three of you as having in common is courage, because following that dream requires a lot of it, because it's a big commitment. Now, as you were in that stage, were there things that you questioned about your own viability, your own capability? And how did you find support or work through them?
I can take that first, because I have a lot of experience with with your question, Brad. So I think the first year of product management, I had heavy imposter syndrome. I just felt like, and typically when you work with more experienced PMs, the thing that you feel that you lack is just the quick thinking, right? The way they approach problems, the way they structure it and break it down. And you kind of feel like, it's a learned behavior. In the beginning you feel like, oh, I'm not capable, but it's not that. It's just adopting the practice of structured thinking, approaching a problem and breaking that down into solvable parts, starting with what is the least that you can solve for, and then building on top of that, right? It's learned thinking. But that did happen when I first started as a product manager. This feeling of, I am only able to translate direct requirements and not necessarily able to take a problem statement and propose a solution for that, right? What really helps is, one, practice structured thinking, right? Don't get bogged down. No problem statement is too large that you cannot immediately solve. And talk to people who actually know. Be very open to talking to experts. That could be engineering teams, that could be UX teams, that could be other industry experts who are not product managers, but they know the domain very well, right? Be very, very open to your own lack of knowledge, and be open to accepting those kind of inputs from others. So that really helps. Two, having a good mentor helps too, and being open to receiving feedback without taking it personally, like it's a personal criticism to you, right? There'll be several times when the feedback might seem to you like, oh, I missed this, I made a mistake, but that's not the point. It's just about learning from that, and having a good mentor really helps. So like those are the two main things that helped me kind of circumvent that. And of course, then I actually took the initiative to get into a program that could help sort out a few other things that I couldn't solve in my day-to-day work. So yeah, a bunch of these things just helped me.
Pranita?
Yeah, so I think Sindhu, all really great points. I think like I 100% agree with all of those things. I think another avenue of doubt that often creeps in, and it happens like I'm sure it happened to me yesterday, right? Which is if you observe the professional landscape, the content landscape, I would say, for product, especially if you look at sources like LinkedIn, where I think you have great resources and great material. It can also often be a source of a lot of the imposter syndrome that we receive, because it feels like we need to understand these frameworks. We need to understand these materials. Like, how are you even a product manager if you don't know these things? And I think what I would advise both for you, for everyone, as well as what I tell myself all the time is, I think really understanding and reflecting on why you want to be a product manager and where you think your strengths and weaknesses are, like really kind of product managing yourself. Probably heard this before, but I think really having an honest conversation with yourself and seeing like these are the areas like I feel confident in, but maybe yes, I could work on how I have my user empathy skills or my quantitative analysis skills, like whatever that is, and then seek out those resources more selectively so that you feel like you have more control over kind of your career narrative. Because I think it is really important to not be swayed by sort of a lot of the materials you see online and have more confidence in yourself as a PM by looking more inwardly. And it's something that I practice a lot too.
Huge plus one on what Sindhu and Parinita said, because all of those are like such right points, because yeah, like things can get overwhelming, and also like like when we are in this industry, it is also overwhelming to some extent. I'll show what works for me and like how I navigated towards it. Like I guess like one mantra I always go with is like it's always an iterative process. You don't have to be right on like day one of it, because you will have people around you to help. You have like great program to help, like to put some baseline to it. So I always like, okay, whatever I'm thinking about how to solve the problem, I just do a like brain dump on a fig jam or document someplace to at least get started. And then places where I like just reaching out to eng folks or data science folks or somebody else that I know will have a right set of knowledge about it. Like same as Prinny said, like know your strengths and also know where to ask help and seek help from others in order to grow. So I think that really helps. So it's always an iterative process. No worry of being like right on day one itself.
Yeah, and my last plug on this is like, I think this conversation alone of just what the three of us shared here is so like, I think there's some great insights, and also just feels validating for myself as a product manager. So like do more of these things, like seek out other, aspiring product managers who like work today, and just try to learn from them. And I think by sharing our vulnerabilities, we all gain confidence in ourselves as well.
100%.
That's a very meta comment, but it's true, isn't it?
Because it just helps. It helps because it empowers you so much, which is like, okay, like I'm not alone. And there is a path that I can take. So like really helps.
Yeah, that's something it really reveals that this career trajectory, it's a team sport. You're not it's best approached as a team sport. And if you're doing it alone, you're going to struggle by definition. Sindhu, I want to go back to a comment that you made about the quickness of thinking like a PM, or the, you might say the muscle memory or the instinct. I truly believe that those people, and I see a lot of them who develop into product managers, the best ones view the world fundamentally differently than they did before. Would anyone like to comment on that?
200%. I see this. Some people are natural product managers just in their daily lives, which is a little intimidating, right? You feel like, oh, this person who is not a PM can be a PM. probably even better based on one conversation you have with them, probably. But it feels a little intimidating because there are people who approach problems in that kind of a structured way, right? But what I want to also mention is it is also learned behavior. You may not have originally been that person, but the ability to break down problems into solvable parts and prioritize which is the most critical thing to address first, that is learned behavior, and that can always be improved as long as you're open to iterations and open to knowledge from others. I think that's a learned skill.
MK, something to add?
Plus one, like I think, like also understanding like everything. You don't have to be super power on this thing. Learning, picking up like the benchmark on, okay, this is a person I look up to, and figuring out your path. It's all like definitely a learned behavior. It's not something. Everything doesn't have to be natural all the time.
Pranita, do you have more, or
No,
another
I was
plus
just
one?
gonna. I
Okay.
agree.
It's all great points.
Yeah. It's fun to observe people as well react differently and catch concepts in real time and watch them implement them into daily life. We're nearly halfway through, so I'm gonna go to the chat a little bit for a handful of questions. I'll skip over those that I think that we already addressed. This one is kind of straightforward. What certifications would you suggest for someone seeking to transition to product management? I hope I know the answer.
To be honest, I haven't done specific certifications for product management. I did the master's program, so it depends on your needs, right? To me, I wanted to kind of fundamentally address the issues in how I approached structured thinking, or how to be strategic in my approach, how to develop skills for user empathy and things like that. So for me, the master's program was a better fit because I kind of approach university education that way. It changes the way you seek and process new information. Certifications, on the other hand, might be helpful, but at least my perspective is that they will help you improve very specific skills, right? So if you find out that, okay, I think this was a point that Pranita also mentioned, if you have specific gaps that you'd like to address, right? Like doing a certification in analytics, or in becoming a Scrum Master, or maybe you want to know how to write better user specific skills that you can address with certifications. But I think it helps to do like a longer program that just fundamentally shifts the way in which you approach problems. At least that is my perspective.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. That was like definitely my push into going to the master's program as well. I think it really helped me like upskill more holistically. Whereas I think like certificates, like I find certificates often can be more helpful if they're related to like your specific job area. So maybe after you have employment somewhere, then it might make sense like to get certifications in the technologies you're using, or if your product area is related to something. I feel like something like that can really help you upskill as a product person, even if it can be often like engineering oriented. So like an example here, more concretely is like in the world of like machine learning, like there's a lot of people kind of interested, or like data analytics, like people are interested in some of these like AWS or Snowflake or Databricks certifications. And you might think, well, while I'm a PM, why might I need that? Like it might be helpful to take some of those intro courses just to better understand like the product as a whole, or some of like the architecture pieces that could like inform your product strategy.
Similar for me as well. Like I didn't do a certification on product management before, so don't have much context about what those certifications look like. But doing a full program helped me gain some confidence in terms of, I don't know if I would have done certification instead, I would have confidence to apply or be sure that, okay, this is something, first like knowing that this is something I want to do for a longer period of time, and also like being confident that, okay, there's something I can provide on table and do justice to this this role, I would have gained from that, from a certification. So a longer program helped me both in understanding myself and also knowing that I am now skilled enough to bring something to the table.
Sort of building on that topic, I always think of the analogy for product management, like you can't learn to swim by reading a book, right? Or even sitting in a classroom. I always, and I hope this is everybody's lived experience, is I always like to think of the MSPM program specifically as a training program. You're getting experience doing real things, not just sitting in a class taking a test and moving on to the next. Can you describe how your experience was in that, and how did that both build the confidence that everyone discussed and sort of get you ready for day one?
Yeah, I can. Okay, go ahead, MK.
Go ahead. So for me, like specifically, like some courses really help. Like some HCI was one important one that really helped, because there were like some frameworks that I learned there, which made me confident on like when I did my internship or when I started my job, that okay, there's something unique I can give a perspective on, because there's so many people who have been in that industry or like so familiar with the product itself, and then you come in, you want to also prove yourself. So that really gave some edge in like bringing something unique to the table, and those practices really help. Second thing that really helped me was human AI. It was one of the courses I took as an elective, and it really helped me because at that time AI was not as huge as it is today, but many of those concepts that I did learn over there, and we used to talk about, okay, like extreme Black Mirror scenarios that can happen, were like really fun activities, and also like force us to think so many of those things, and many of those applications like today are somewhere or else like coming into life. So these gave a lot of perspective that I lacked before.
Yeah, I think specific coursework for me, I think actually the business communications course, especially around building presentations, the amount of upward management and upward communication that I've had to do at this job and at other jobs before this too, being able to craft your point of view or your strategic vision upwards and help tie it to things that your audience cares about is honestly such an invaluable skill. And I think learning that in I think a less pressure environment with less pressure topics, which is what I think the business communications course focused on, really was a grounding framework to help translate it to like a lot of these work concepts. I think a lot of the HCI courses were also really helpful, similar to what MK said. I think bringing a unique point of view of how to approach a problem. Like sometimes you bring this unique point of view that's really learned behavior from the program to a meeting or to a workshop where we're thinking about how to approach a particular problem, and you really cement your role in that room as like someone who has a unique way of bringing people together. And I think it helps paint your career story in a really kind of interesting way, in a way that does set you apart, like MK was also saying. So I think those are a couple skills, like it really shows up in your work. The amount of ways that I've kind of impacted product management thinking within organizations I've been at has been really helpful, like just framing how we grow like product managers within an organization. A lot of that I owe to kind of the thinking that I learned within MSPM, for sure.
I think that the one that Pranita said is such a great point, which is like unconscious behavior, which is like because of how you are trained for 1 year, you don't even realize like the things you catch, and that becomes like a routine.
Anything else to add before we move on?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I kind of had a very direct pipeline. I went in the program with specific objectives. I chose those subjects that helped me and kind of helps me in, like I mentioned, I work with 0 to 1 products. So a lot of the different courses from design to business, a lot of them had this angle of start with a business idea and then create like the framework, create the problem statement, the requirements. A bunch of different subjects approach the same topic from different perspectives, and kind of all of that together helped me in my day-to-day work.
Great. Next up, we have an extremely common question, which is good because there are certainly a lot of people wondering this. I'm currently a software QA engineer, want to move into product management. I guess this person's asking for suggestions. I guess I'll reframe it just a little bit and say, if you were to advise an aspiring PM, somebody maybe in engineering, that type of a position, if you were to advise them with maybe the most important bit of advice that you can think of for that someone in that situation, what might it be?
I would say like just knowing more themselves and the role that they currently play. Like for example, just taking example of a QA person, they do like see end to end of like product functioning, and when they see the product, if it comes to their mind that, oh, like I wish it was done a different way, or if I was doing it, I would have also added this to the product. That's a very good signal to catch on that there is a part in your brain that wants like, okay, this is a role that might be a good fit for me. And I've seen like so many people transitioning from eng to product. So totally depends upon what you want to choose eventually. So most of them have like a fear of like, okay, I don't want to get into too much of a business side. I want to still be very close to the tech product itself. So these are like multiple choices that you will have if you transition. But if seeing a product, it comes to your mind that, okay, this is how I want to improve it, then that's a good signal to catch on that product management might be a place for you.
I think from like a practical standpoint, if you have decided that you like product management, then I think, at least practically speaking, what I've seen work is there are really only two ways in which you can actually affect the move, right? Either you choose a program that allows you to then be hired into a product management role. Doing a master's helps in that regard, and you can show how in the master's you specifically learned skills that allow you to apply that in a product management role. So that's option one. Option two, which can be combined with option one, is you start working closely with PMs or with the product team in a product adjacent capacity in your current position and in your current company. It is very difficult to move to a new role across companies. So you need to prove yourself, and also it's a testing period for you, right? To see whether you are truly interested in the role. So you need to start performing in some product adjacent capacity, at least for a short period of time, and leverage that to move into the product team within whatever org you already are part of, and then see how that works for a longer product management career. So this could be, if you are in like an engineering position, you're probably already working with PMs in some capacity. If you can translate that into some kind of requirements gathering or some product analyst type of role, I think that would be the best way to approach this.
Yeah, and kind of rounding out all these couple answers with like the last point of like how to frame yourself potentially, like your role and your background. I think I've spoken to multiple people before around transitioning into PM, and there is an approach I see where people, if let's say your background's in finance, and they want to do the exact opposite of that, or another industry, maybe your industry experience is like healthcare, or and they want to do the exact opposite of that. I think sometimes actually leaning into your experience and working with products that are like adjacent to the industries you've worked in or adjacent to the roles you've worked in, right? So let's say maybe like if your background is in like QA engineering, maybe you lean into a product that is oriented towards like bettering the lives of QA engineers. And I think because you offer a unique perspective, I don't think you should like erase that part of your story, because I think that's actually where your value proposition is quite unique and very valuable. And so that would be like my first idea of framing. And the second idea of framing is within your job role, like whatever that might be, there's probably some specific skill sets that make you kind of really excel in that area. So especially with, I think, engineering, like that problem solving and critical thinking lens, like again, don't let that light shine, or let the light shine. Do not let that light dim, and make sure that you're really positioning yourself as like, I have this background in engineering that'll help me bring that mindset to product management, as opposed to, maybe others that you are kind of competing with for similar roles. So again, lean into your background, both from like a role skill set perspective and other industry background perspectives too.
I actually want to plus one on, especially on Pranita's first point. And basically, a lot of the PM roles might seek industry expertise. So if you have worked in finance, if you worked in healthcare, and it feels like, hey, this is apples and oranges, it is not. They need domain expertise to build products specifically for that domain. So that could be your entry point. So you should start solving problems within whatever industry you are in. So you can position that from a product perspective and then leverage that to enter into product management. So yeah, I just wanted to add that to Pranita's point.
Wow, that's so much better than standard general advice that you see on social and so on. Thank you all for those great answers. We'll move to a much easier one, maybe one that is a little bit opinion based. Is it possible to work 100% as a PM remotely, or is it necessary to meet your stakeholder / customer in person? I have a strong opinion on that. I think there might be others.
I can go because the role that I had before this, I was 100% remote. And I think it can work, but the caveat there is you have to really make it work. So like if you're not necessarily out in the field with your customers, which I've literally, like, I used to work at the Home Depot before, and like I used to be at the store sometimes, like talking to actual users. So transitioning to a 100% remote role where I was really more just, looking to see how could I connect. There weren't really a lot of direct channels. So I had to really actively push myself to call customers, to sometimes, try to set up our own like user interviewing process that wasn't really in place. And so you have to really go out of your way, because I do understand for certain, sets of groups of people, like there's going to be worlds where 100% remote might have to be your possibility. So you just have to, I think it can work. It's not always the easiest, but try to see if you can leverage, user interview pipelines or user research pipelines to like make that happen.
Similar, it's like both have their advantages and disadvantages, which is remote gives you some flexibility, but being in person, I guess, like when you are even in office, just talking to certain folks, you learn so much that's going on in other product areas. So there are a lot of advantages to it. Having said that, remote can also work if that's the only choice that you have, because then only thing is that you have to put a strategic effort, which is like way to connect with your colleagues, maybe on maybe traveling to the workplace maybe once a quarter or once in 6 months to establish those relationships with stakeholders, or having some remote way of you may not be able to talk to customers every day, but or on figure out some prime occasions, maybe a conference, or maybe just going to in the same as Pranita said, going to Home Depot store and just asking them those questions. And many a times you also have so many online channels to connect with your customers. So you will have to find your ways out. It's not 100% impossible to be remote and not be a successful PM. You can be, but it's just extra effort.
So my answer might be a little different in that what I've seen with my experiences when it comes to talking to customers or even working with leadership, right? It truly doesn't matter if you're working in person or remote, because a lot of your customers are just spread out everywhere. And you're most likely just interacting with them virtually anyway. Your leaders are also spread across and their calendars are so filled. You are not going to get a lot, especially in a bigger org. You're not really getting FaceTime, except if it is super critical or there is some industry event happening. You're not really getting FaceTime with them, right? So from an effectiveness perspective of how well you can work with leaders or how well you can work with customers, I personally believe you can 100% do it remote. The challenge, though, is how well your company's culture is set up for remote work. The true challenge is how well can you communicate with your engineering stakeholders, with your UX people, with other PMs, and that is extremely difficult. If your company doesn't have a strong culture for enabling remote work, that means you're spending hours pinging people, hey, can we meet? And sometimes people respond, sometimes people don't. They don't accept your invite, or they accept and then don't turn up to meetings. Those are very real challenges when it comes to the actual day-to-day work, right? So if your company has a strong culture of truly being hybrid or enabling remote, then you can 100% work remote. But if the company is geared towards a certain other type of general working style, then it'll be difficult for you to be effective 100% remote. And that might show up in only your performance as opposed to someone who's a little more hybrid or in person.
That's fun. I think knowing what your company is encouraging to do is like important, whereas like being remote in a company that's coming more in office, like sometimes had disadvantages. If the company is well equipped, it becomes much more easier. So like when finding job, like knowing the company culture might be the best thing to do, whether to be remote or not.
I think also a very important point about just leadership visibility. I think especially when a lot of us are starting roles remotely or starting a new role, I think that can be a pretty common question. And I have definitely struggled with how do you get leadership more just involved in your personal career growth, but also sort of understanding your product vision and strategy, kind of the visibility of that piece. And I think I've noticed that it definitely requires you to be more proactive actually too. So, maybe you don't usually like in person, you may not set up a one-on-one with someone who might be in a senior leadership team, but in a remote work environment, like that's something that a lot of times it becomes an expectation. So I would say as an encouragement, like feel free to do that and feel free to sort of ask for the visibility that you need, especially if you're trying to have more of that hybrid remote environment that Sindhu was mentioning too.
Yeah, 100% agree with that point, which is that you would think that, oh, if I go in person, I'll just chance upon these leaders in lunchrooms and while walking the corridors. And that could happen, but you're not getting any meaningful face time with them. It is actually a little bit easier to coordinate with their executive assistants and set up even like a 15-minute short block of time as a catch up, or there are these virtual hangout sessions. And to be completely honest, the surest way to visibility is just being part of a high visibility project, right? So those are things that you can effectively do remotely. But yeah, in person helps with things like team engagement, and especially if you are starting in a relatively juniorish position and you feel a little more empowered to ask questions in a casual way in person, as opposed to sometimes it feels like if you're pinging people questions, you feel like you're disturbing them, right? So if you're a little more junior, maybe it helps to be in person. But I think beyond a certain point, you can do remote as long as the company is set up to encourage that kind of work culture.
We may or may not have time for multiple questions, but I'll get this one in case it's our last question, because I think there will be a lot of personal stories related to this. And MK, I know that you might need to leave a few minutes early, so I'll start with you. What advice do you have for the PM recruiting process? How did you go about identifying the right types of roles? What resources did you use? In general, what was your experience? What was your strategy in the job search itself?
For me, like for prep itself, like I did a lot of like peer interviews, like within like the cohort itself. Like we were very open about like giving each other feedback, being more critical about like how to structure your answers and how to talk about it. But for search itself, I was intentional about like these are the top companies that I would want to apply, and just reached out to the hiring managers who were at that time recruiting for the role, and going, like talking to them, sharing the interest, and then going through the loop itself, because that really helped me, because instead of like a wide search, I was like working with different companies whose ideas or at least vision overall excited me, and then went with one of their mentors. Went through the process.
Pranita and Sindhu, I know that you did this during different times economy-wise. Be interesting to hear your stories.
I think yeah, right. When I was doing my job search, I started out a little naive and I was extremely narrow in the number of companies and the types of positions that I was applying for. But at that time, I hadn't completed my program. This was at the beginning of the MSPM program. So the reality was we weren't really getting callbacks with that level of a targeted approach. Now I can afford to be. Now that I have one foot in the industry, I can be a little more selective. But in the beginning, it also helps to kind of look at different companies across different industries and just get a sense of what are these different companies looking for, right? At least keep the initial search broad. Maybe your applications can still be targeted, but keep your search very broad to just learn about more companies and more roles. What did help in the actual hiring process was referrals, of course, help way more than going into the general route. Sometimes it could be a year before you actually hear back from the company. I recently read about ghost listings. I'm not sure if that's true, but referrals help. Actually talking to the recruiters also helps, way more effective. If you see LinkedIn posts from specific recruiters, reaching out to them, understanding the role, and especially reach out to them if you see that the job description kind of matches the experience that you have, because recruiters are interested in speeding up the process, shortening the search process, right? So if you have relevant experience, start with that and they are likely to respond to you, and that is one of the surest ways to actually getting some kind of communication back from the company. The prep itself, practice your answers quite a bit, because you may think you know your work very well, but the minute you start answering, you will discover you have missed out critical points. Even with notes, you may have missed critical points. You may not structure it well, or your story takes so long that you're not hooking them with the right data points in your story that you want them to actually dive deeper into. So practice quite a bit. The star format is extremely helpful. I think it also helps with that structured thinking that I was mentioning before. Always think of everything that you've achieved in that star format, so you always have a situation and a result to bookend your stories.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I definitely did what I term panic apply, which is whenever you see a product manager listing, you just kind of apply to it, which is, in a way, you can term that broad search, I think. But honestly, I think it is, like Sindhu mentioned, it is a strategy if you do want to cast a wider net, because I do understand like the market really matters. Having graduated in 2019 from the master's program, those are kind of I just started working in 2020, and I think like in 2019, I would still say the market was definitely like you could try doing a broadcast of applications and still maybe convert that to an interview. And I think nowadays I've heard, especially like a lot of applicants apply to like 200 jobs or something and don't really get called back. So I do think the more specific strategy here of leveraging your network is really important, and being really specific about why you're reaching out to someone about a role. Like think from their perspective too. Like, you see the job description, what would be interesting to you as a recruiter or a hiring manager to see in this role? And I think try to like really think about sort of your audience perspective too, to see where that hook is, to make sure that your leads, if you look at these as leads, are really good ones, and ones that you think you can really look to convert. So specificity is really, really important here. And again, going back to one of my earlier points of why you would be going into product management, lean into those. I may sound like a broken record, but lean into those same areas, right? Whether that's like your industry experience or specific skill sets that come with like your background, really lean into those and make sure those help like paint your story and everything, Sindhu and MK mentioned about like interview preparation as well. If you're really concrete and confident about like your story, your narrative, and how, like, if someone was to hire you, what is the thought framework that you bring, like painting that really repeatedly and evidently in your interview structure, I think helps a lot. So like if you approach every part of the interview kind of similarly, people get a good idea of like, if I were to hire this person, this is the kind of product thinking, or this is the kind of critical thinking they would bring. And I feel like that paints it's such an easy hiring decision then for them to be able to make too.
Yeah, there's another interesting one that I would love to share with folks as well. Like huge plus one to like what you guys said as well, which is like if you are like very passionate about one of the industry, people went a little more far in prepping for it, which is like sending the hiring manager some of the ideas based on like the product that they have put the job posting on, that if I was a product manager, these are the XYZ things that I would do. And if you are really, you can't do it for 200 applications, but if there are one or two that you're excited about, I felt like that was also a very powerful move to showcase them that, okay, these are the skills that I bring to the table. This is how I will perform as a product manager. So that also gives a very unique perspective to a hiring manager.
Yeah, it's always ideal to show and not tell, right?
Yeah.
All right, before everybody, we're near the end. Before, important announcement while everybody's still online here. We, the MSPM program, are currently accepting applications for the 2025 year, and our program starts in January, finishes in December. It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it produces unbelievable personalities like you have on your screen right now. I wouldn't say we produced you. I would say that we were able to find an excellent match. You produced yourselves within the context of the program. So we are accepting applications. The next deadline is a few weeks away. It's a relatively easy application. Please don't be afraid to apply. Go for it. And if you do, as a viewer for this webinar, you can use, there's a code within the application itself, and you can use WT for Women Tech 25, WT25, to have the fee waived and reduced to zero. So no fee application for viewers of today's session. If you are curious, we've done other similar webinars with the Women Tech Network that are on YouTube and available on their site. You can get more insights from great people just like the ones you got today. And I have to say, Pranita, Sindhu, MK, thank you so much. This is absolutely, watching you succeed and sharing your stories is the best part, hands down, of my job. So you made today easy.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brad.
thank you so much
It was
for
a lovely
having us.
session.
Yeah.
Nice
Thank
talking
you
to
so
you all
much.
today.
Yeah.